Pig, the Reverend Stinkfinger, Sir Belzac Hardbodies and Fats White. These are just some of the creations of Brent Hayward. Notorious for challenging mainstream conceptions of aesthetics, morality and taste, Brent has been working with music, poetry and film since the late 70s.
I don't believe I'm of this world, you know. I'm just in it. And, you know, call me a user, call me an abuser. You know, you've called me everything else under the sun.
Brent came to prominence as a vocalist in 1979 with the punk rock group Shoes This High.
They were great. And the singer was sort of extreme. He was certainly one of a kind. The skinny geek who obviously was an anti-star, you know. He
became an artist on his own smelly feet. And he'd go around selling records and playing on the streets. One of the first buskers I've ever seen too, actually.
Later in '81, singing with the Kiwi Animal, Brent Hayward found himself caught in the maelstrom of a musical revolution as Kiwi rock entered what would become known as a golden age.
Yeah, the times were really interesting because punk had a huge effect, but most people with any intelligence in the music scene had sort of got over punk and used it for what it was and gone on.
After a decade of making music and living the rock and roll lifestyle, Brent began to explore his darker recesses in both performance and film.
Started unleashing possibly something that I had been holding back, which was these forces of, you know, my own devils.
Honestly, find Brent a fantastic talent, and he told me he's made 60 films or something close to that. And that really surprised me because I think I've only seen about 6 or 7 of them.
His sexuality and physicality became a primary focus.
And we both kind of went down, I suppose, the darker sides of them, but not really realising, I suppose, that they were dark sides as such, because we're into the kind of the beyond good and evil perspective of things.
I was ready for the last days. I was making my own apocalypse, you know. I wanted to kill, crush, destroy.
While some found his antics outrageous, others found them amusing.
The thing about Brent is he's got like this enormous penis. And you know, he's like I'm a performance artist, right? You know, and I mean, you know, sometimes I have to be naked to you know, enhance this performance artist aspect of my life. But in actual fact, he's got a big cock and he loves getting it out and waving it around, right? And I guess I would as well, you know, if mine was, which it is.
Although Brent was exploring new media, alternative culture was to remain a focus of his art. Throughout the 80s and 90s, as one of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and later as the Reverend Stinkfinger, Brent explored queer culture both personally and professionally. His film, Manawa Nui, won a prize at the Sydney Gay Film Festival in 1997. The positivity that had pervaded queer culture and influenced Brent in the early 90s was, however, superseded. Larger cultural concerns were to emerge after 3 terms of a national government.
Confession Johnny Barcode was probably the most interesting film of his that I saw. Things that I know, I noticed that early on in the beginning there's footage from a sports stadium with people maybe in an opening ceremony, and the entire crowd and everyone on the field is shot in negative, which seems indicative of Brent Hayward's work. His disdain for the masses is palatable. A filmmaker like Brent Hayward treads a fine line between social statement and artistic fascism.
Brent never lost the ability to enjoy shocking an audience.
I went home and left the camera there, and when I got tape in the morning, for some reason, Brent had pissed in a cup after espousing some crazy poetry. Brent pissed in the cup, announced that he's a good Kiwi boy and he enjoys drinking his own piss, and then drank this piss, his own urine. So of course we put it on television.
With the dawning of the new millennium, Brent was reawakened by nature. New Year's Eve 2000 was a personal turning point as he found himself communing with the endangered Kaimanawa horses.
the wild horses saw my psyche. They saw me coming, you know. So Charlie says to the other horse, you know, let's round up. You know, rather than them being scared of me, they came up to me.
I'm sure that Horse Numb proves now that Brent Hayward's becoming a much more positive filmmaker, not trying to so much concentrate on only the nasty things in life, which a majority of his early and mid-period stuff certainly did.
It was an experience that would lead Brent back to performing as a musician and to an identification with the principles of Christ.
I think his baptism was pretty cool.
That's right.
Like he finally told me he like saw the Lord or something, and I just thought it was another one of his sort of acts, you know. But sure enough, he, you know, put out a flyer and announced on the radio that he was getting baptised.
He tried to put it on the gig guide.
On the gig, it was on the gig guide, yeah.
Well, I thought they weren't going to do it.
Oh, right.
Because it wasn't a gig, but did it make it on?
I think so.
He doesn't like to do things half-heartedly, so when he decided that that was how life was going to be for him now, he really threw himself into it, and I think it's really good because he's a very bold person, and he's different in that sense to a lot of other Christians, and I think that's why God wants him.
I just want to, you know, create life. I want to feel love.
I mean, from way back, you know, and even in the Bible, that was kind of, you know, where Jesus was focusing on the rejects and the outcasts, and Brent's always been for the underdog, you know.
Because it's one of the greatest painkillers. Love is.
In a journey that is sure to contain many more permutations and aberrations, Brent Hayward and Fats White find themselves on the path of righteousness, searching for a new truth and creating new prophecies.
He's a really articulate and literate human being that really lives by his own rules, and in this day and age, it's quite hard to do.
I think that the fact that so many people are into what he does is because he does it with sincere honesty and integrity, and that's very rare these days. Everybody's selling out for some reason or another.
I could never be as good as Jesus, but I'm trying to live a life.
I don't know, Brent Hayward, genius of sorts.
Streets of Auckland, streets of Auckland, streets of Auckland, streets of Auckland. Yes, Yeshu was born in a bus shelter. His ma and pa were homeless and out there living on the street. Yes, Yeshu was the original street kid doing temple invasions.
I sent a big guy to beat him up once, but the guy was so fat he couldn't catch him, and Brent just ran off.
When he said his love was for all humankind, the enemy stretched out.
I mean, there's like two people in the world that could wear what Brent does, Michael Jackson and Brent Hayward.